Is Estevao Willian the most exciting player at Chelsea? Right now, let me ask you something before we get into this. When was the last time a Chelsea player made you jump out of your seat every single time the ball touched his feet? When was the last time a teenager walked onto the Stamford Bridge pitch and made the whole crowd hold their breath with excitement? When was the last time you watched a player and thought to yourself, this kid is going to be very, very special? For a lot of Chelsea fans watching the Port Vale game on Saturday evening, that moment came again and again and again. The player responsible was an 18-year-old Brazilian winger named Estevao Willian, and if you were not already paying close attention to him after what he did against Port Vale, you really should be. This blog post is going to cover everything you need to know about Estevao, what he did against Port Vale, why it matters, what it means for the Manchester City clash coming up on Sunday, April 12th, and why Chelsea fans should be genuinely excited about what this young man is showing us. Let us get into it. The night Estevao reminded everyone what he can do. Chelsea beat Port Vale 7-0 in the FA Cup on Saturday evening. It was a big win, a comfortable win, and a win that Chelsea desperately needed after a really difficult few weeks. But before we talk about the result itself, let us talk about the run-up to this game. Because the context matters a lot here. Chelsea had just suffered 4 defeats in a row across all competitions. They had slumped to 6th place in the Premier League. The mood around the club was not great. Fans were frustrated. Manager Liam Rosenyor was under pressure. And then you had the whole situation with Enzo Fernandez being dropped from the squad, which added another layer of tension to an already stressful period. So walking into the Port Vale game, Chelsea needed a win. Not just for the result, but for the confidence, for the morale, for the belief that this group of players can still do something special this season, and they delivered 7 goals, a place in the FA Cup semi-finals at Wembley, and a man-of-the-match performance from Estevao Willian that had everyone talking. What Estevao actually did against Port Vale. Now, the honest thing to say here is that Port Vale are not Manchester City. Port Vale are bottom of League One and are likely to be relegated to the 4th division of English football, so we should not go completely overboard with the praise. But here is the thing. It does not matter who the opposition is when a player does what Estevao did on Saturday night. The quality he showed, the directness, the creativity, the hunger, the work rate, all of that is what makes him stand out. So what did he actually do? Let us look at the numbers first. He scored a goal, he got an assist, he played 4 key passes, he created 3 big chances for his teammates, he won 5 duels, he recovered possession 5 times. Now those are very impressive numbers, but the numbers do not even tell the full story. The full story is in what it felt like to watch him play. Every time the ball came to Estevao, the crowd reacted. Fans were on their feet. There was electricity in the air at Stamford Bridge. He was direct, he was confident, he was hungry for the ball, and he made things happen almost every time he got involved. One journalist covering the game described his second-half performance as intoxicating, and that is a pretty good word for it. He was not just good, he was exciting. There is a difference. A lot of players can be technically good without being exciting. Estevao is both, the halftime switch that changed everything. Here is one of the most interesting parts of the Port Vale story that a lot of people might have missed. Estevao did not start the game at his best. In the first half, he was playing on the left side. Port Vale set up their defensive shape in a way that made it very difficult for him to find space and get into the game. He was being crowded out constantly, multiple defenders cutting off his running lanes. He did not have a bad first half, but he was not dominating it either. Then at halftime, Rosenyor made an adjustment. He switched Estevao to the right side, swapping positions with Pedro Neto. And that simple change made a massive difference. The right side had more space. The Port Vale defenders were not as organized on that flank, and Estevao had the freedom he needed to really show what he can do. The second half display was on another level. More direct, more dangerous, more involved in everything. The goal came, the assist came, the big chances came. It was all flowing through him. And this tells you something very important about Estevao as a player. He is not someone who just runs set patterns. He adapts. He responds to what is happening in the game. He flourishes when given space and freedom, and once he found that on the right side, he could not be stopped. It also tells you something about Rosenyor. The manager spotted the problem at halftime, made a change, and the change worked. That kind of tactical awareness and willingness to adjust mid-game is exactly what Chelsea need from their head coach right now. Why this performance matters so much. Let us step back and think about the bigger picture here. Estevao Willian is 18 years old. 18. Think about what you were doing at 18. This young man has come from Brazil, moved to London, joined one of the biggest football clubs in the world, and is now producing moments of genuine quality at Stamford Bridge in front of thousands of fans. The expectation on him was enormous from the moment Chelsea signed him. The transfer fee, the hype, the comparisons, all of it put a huge amount of pressure on a teenager who was still learning the game at the highest level. And yet here he is, not just coping with that pressure, thriving under it. The report from the game mentioned that Reece James, the Chelsea captain who is currently injured and watching from the stands, gave Estevao a tight bear hug as the young winger walked off the pitch. Reece James is not someone who throws that kind of affection around easily. That moment said a lot about how the whole squad views Estevao and what he means to this group. But here's the question we really need to ask. Is one great performance against a League One team enough to say he should definitely start against Manchester City? Let us talk about that. Should Estevao start against Manchester City? This is the big question. And honestly, after what he did against Port Vale, it is hard to argue against it. Let us think about what Chelsea need in that game. Manchester City under Pep Guardiola are always extremely well organized. They press high, they dominate possession, they are very intelligent tactically. They are a team that can suffocate you if you sit back and let them control things. What Chelsea need is someone who can break lines, someone who can run at defenders, someone who creates moments out of nothing and forces the opposition to react rather than just control, someone who can turn a game with a single piece of brilliance. Does that sound like anyone we have been talking about? Estavao is exactly the kind of player who can hurt a high line. His pace, his direct running, his ability to beat defenders one-on-one, all of that becomes even more dangerous against a team that pushes their defensive line up the pitch. If Chelsea can get him the ball in space behind the City fullbacks, he has the ability to cause real problems. Now, City are obviously a much, much tougher test than Port Vale. The players are better, the system is more sophisticated, the pressure will be greater, and it is completely fair to say that what Estevao showed against League One opposition does not automatically guarantee the same results against a top Premier League side. But here's the thing, you do not build confidence by keeping a player on the bench after a performance like that. If Rosenior wants Estevao to grow, to push on, to become the player Chelsea need him to be, then giving him the start against City is exactly the right move. You back him, you trust him, you give him the chance to show what he can do at the highest level. And even if it does not go perfectly, the process of him being on that pitch, competing against the best, learning in real time, that is how you develop a player like this. The international break story nobody is talking about enough. One detail from the build-up to the Port Vale game stood out, and it deserves more attention than it has been getting. While most of the Chelsea squad was away on international duty during the break, Estevao stayed at Cobham, Chelsea's training ground, working every day with Rosenior and the coaching staff. Think about what that means. An 18-year-old Brazilian player far from home could have taken some time off, could have gone back to Brazil, could have relaxed for a couple of weeks. Instead, he chose to stay and work, to put in extra sessions, to improve, to prepare. That kind of dedication and professionalism at 18 years old is not common. It tells you something about his character, it tells you how seriously he takes his development, and it tells you that the international break, which was a difficult period for the club off the pitch, was not wasted time for Estevao. He was getting better while everyone else was away. Rosenior acknowledged this, saying the break was really important in terms of himself and the staff and the club. And it is clear that part of what made the Port Vale performance so good was the extra work Estevao put in during those 2 weeks. When you see a young player show that kind of work ethic, you start to believe that the ceiling is very, very high. The Chelsea crisis context. We cannot fully appreciate what Estevao is doing without understanding the situation the club is in right now. Chelsea have been through a really tough few weeks, 4 defeats in a row, a drop to 6th in the Premier League. The Enzo Fernandez situation, where the club dropped him from the squad with the statement that a line was crossed, created a lot of noise and uncertainty. There were questions about the dressing room, about the manager, about the direction of the club. Into that environment walks an 18-year-old kid who just stays focused, works hard, and then goes and puts in a man-of-the-match performance when the team needs it most. That is not nothing. That is actually quite remarkable. Chelsea still have a lot of work to do. They are in 6th place in the Premier League with Brentford and Everton closing the gap in the race for European football. The next few weeks are absolutely crucial. They face Manchester City, they are in the FA Cup semi-finals at Wembley, and every Premier League game between now and the end of the season is going to matter. But Estevao gives them something to be excited about, something to build around, a genuine source of attacking threat and creativity in a team that has been struggling to find consistency. Rosenior said after the Port Vale win that he still believes this group can have an outstanding season, both in terms of winning the FA Cup and qualifying for Champions League. That might sound optimistic given recent results. But with players like Estavao hitting form at the right time, it is not completely unrealistic. What the numbers tell us about the £440 million. One of the most striking facts from the Port Vale game was mentioned in the match coverage. The Chelsea starting 11 that night cost close to £440 million in combined transfer fees, not just the squad, the starting 11. Port Vale, on the other hand, fielded a team that did not cost a single penny in transfer fees. 8 free transfers, 2 loanees, and 1 academy graduate from their own club. The gap in quality was enormous, and Chelsea emphasized that with a 7-goal win. But here is the thing. The gap in wages, resources, and squad investment does not automatically translate into results. Chelsea have been proving that in some painful ways over recent weeks. What the Port Vale game showed is what Chelsea can look like when everything clicks, when the quality on paper becomes quality on the pitch, when players like Estavao are given the platform to express themselves and they deliver. The £440 million stat is not just about Port Vale. It is a reminder of the investment that has gone into this squad and the expectation that comes with that. Chelsea supporters and the club's ownership want to see that investment pay off, and performances like Estavao's on Saturday are the first steps in that direction. What makes Estavao different? Let us talk about what actually makes Estavao special as a player. Because there are a lot of technically good young players at big clubs across Europe. What separates the ones who become truly great from the ones who fizzle out? From what we have seen so far, Estevao has a few qualities that stand out above everything else. First, he is direct. He does not waste time on the ball, he sees what he wants to do, and he does it. That decisiveness is rare in young players, who often overthink things or try to take one too many touches. Estevao is not like that. He receives the ball, and he attacks. Second, he works hard without the ball. This is huge. A lot of exciting attacking players switch off when the team is defending. Not Estevao. The stats show he won 5 duels and recovered possession 5 times against Port Vale. He is not just a passenger when Chelsea do not have the ball. He is pressing, chasing, fighting, and that is what modern football demands from your wide players. Third, he is a creator as well as a scorer. 4 key passes, 3 big chances created, 1 goal, 1 assist. That is a player who is both a direct threat and a threat for the people around him. He makes his teammates better. He pulls defenders out of position, creates space for others, and picks the right pass when the moment calls for it. And fourth, he has the mentality, the work during the international break, the focus during a difficult period for the club, the reaction to a slow first half where he did not sulk or hide but came out in the second half and dominated. These are signs of a mentally strong player, and mental strength more than almost anything else is what separates good players from great ones. The Rosenior factor. One thing that does not get talked about enough in all of this is the relationship between Estevao and Liam Rosenior. Rosenior has clearly identified Estevao as a key player in his plans. The extra work during the international break was not just the player being diligent on his own, it was the manager and coaching staff working closely with him, developing him, preparing him. The halftime tactical switch against Port Vale shows Rosenior is thinking carefully about how to get the best out of Estevao. He spotted the problem, he made the change, and it worked. That relationship between manager and player, where the coach understands what the player needs to thrive, is one of the most important factors in a young player's development. Rosenior has been in charge for almost 3 months now. He has had time to assess the squad, build relationships, and start to implement his ideas. And it is becoming clearer that Estevao is right at the center of those ideas. If Rosenior is going to build a Chelsea team that qualifies for the Champions League and challenges for trophies, Estevao is going to be a massive part of that journey. And what we saw against Port Vale was a glimpse of just how exciting that journey could be. What needs to happen next? So where do we go from here? What needs to happen for Chelsea to turn the momentum from the Port Vale win into something sustained? A few things stand out. First, Estevao needs to start against Manchester City. We have covered the reasons why. He deserves it based on his performance. And City need to be wary of what he can do. Second, the team around him needs to perform. Estevao cannot do it alone. Cole Palmer, Pedro Neto, the midfield, the defense, everyone needs to be at their best. The Port Vale win was a team performance, and the Manchester City game will need to be one too. Third, Chelsea need to string results together. One win against League One opposition, as good as it felt, does not fix a 4-game losing streak. The Manchester City game on April 12th, the FA Cup semi-final, the remaining Premier League games, this is where the season will be decided. And fourth, the off-field situation needs to settle down. The Fernandes situation created unnecessary noise and disruption. Rosenior will want his squad focused entirely on football from here on. With the FA Cup semi-final and a Champions League push still very much alive, this is not the time for distractions. A final word on Estevao. Before we wrap up, let us come back to where we started. When was the last time a Chelsea player made you jump out of your seat every time the ball touched his feet? For those watching Estevao Willian against Port Vale on Saturday night, the answer is simple. He did it again and again and again. He is 18 years old. He is still learning. He will have bad games. There will be moments when the pressure gets to him or the form dips. That is part of any young player's journey, especially at a club with the size and expectations of Chelsea. But the talent is very, very real. The work ethic is very, very real. And the excitement he generates in the Chelsea fan base is very, very real. The claim going around before the game that this would be a performance unlike anything the Premier League has seen was an exaggeration. Port Vale are a League One team. We need to keep perspective. But the performance itself was genuinely excellent. And it was a reminder that on his best days, Estevao Willian is something quite special. Manchester City are coming to Stamford Bridge on April 12th. Pep Guardiola will have his game plan ready. His players will be prepared. City are one of the best teams in the world. But if Estevao Willian gets the ball in space on that right side, with the crowd behind him and the momentum of a big FA Cup win in his legs, do not be surprised if something remarkable happens. Chelsea fans, the wait for your next great wide player might finally be over. And honestly, is there anything more exciting than watching an 18-year-old Brazilian with the world at his feet run at defenders with everything to prove? We will find out for sure on Sunday, April 12th. And for the first time in a few weeks, Chelsea fans have a reason to be genuinely excited about what might happen next. See you at Stamford Bridge.